Hello and good evening, everybody. My name's Matt. I'm the Managing Director of ProMed, and I'm your presenter for tonight's webinar on radiocommunications protocols and demonstrations. I've worked in multi-agency control rooms in many different roles, including as a medical coordinator, a medical controller, a security controller, an event control room manager, several other different guises. So I'm bringing together all of that knowledge and looking particularly at how we, as part of the medical team, can use that, use radios to help us effectively deliver our service. So tonight's webinar is free of charge, as all of our webinar series is, but we do also, through our training partners, offer some training courses. All of them are available at promed999.co.uk/training. Things that we offer include the FREC 3 qualification, which also includes the Administering Medical Gases course, which includes the Entonox. That's £390. It runs over 3 consecutive weekends near Aylesbury. Our next dates are the 24th of October, although that course is now on a waiting list. The course after that will be early in 2021. Our level 4 FREC is also very popular. The next course only has a few spaces left on the 20th of November, again running near Aylesbury. That is delivered over 3 weekends, but they're broken up to give you plenty of time to complete your workbooks as QualSafe intend you to. Our ILS course is available on the 15th of November, a couple of spaces available on that. £150 gets you the Resource Council's immediate life support book to keep as well. And our safe administration of life-saving medication level 3 is £200, and that's on the 21st and 22nd of November, including the JR Calc pocket book, which you get to keep, take away, and use as a point of reference. If you'd like to book onto any of those, do visit the website promed999.co.uk/training. And the other thing that we'd like to promote is that we are always on the lookout for new staff, especially staff who take their CPD seriously. So if coming on tonight's webinar, you're already ticking the box that you take the maintenance of your qualification and the operational skills associated with delivering high quality clinical care very seriously. If you would like an application form, just email apply@promed999.co.uk. We'll send you the application form once we've seen the certificates and done our background checks, done a quick video interview with you on Zoom. We do have lots of work coming in at the moment. As I say, I don't have an admin team tonight because the 3 people that were down for that have all ended up working on jobs that we didn't have until this morning. So plenty of work available all across the UK. Just drop us an email, apply@promed999.co.uk, and we'll get that application form out to you. Just our usual code of conduct. So we believe that everybody attending our training events has the right to expect a space free from bullying, intimidation, and harassment. And we ask that you treat each other with dignity, respect, and courtesy, and not discriminate against one another. These webinars do often invite a lot of discussion, and it's great that we're all keen to learn from each other, and it's absolutely fine if we disagree with one another, as long as we do that in a respectful and courteous manner, then it's all good. If you do want to report anything, you can send it through to either myself or to admin team. Admin team is just my tablet that's sat next to me, so I can monitor the chat a little bit easier. If it's after the webinar, just email webinars@promed999.co.uk and we shall have a look into it. So tonight we're going to be looking at hand-portable radios, mobile radios. Going to look at how to test the radio first of all, how to then send a basic message, how to deal with long messages, what to do if you have a priority message, and then just briefly have a look at the common kind of shorthand and TLAs, or 3-letter acronyms. So to begin, let's look at our hand-portable radio. So our hand-portable radio, I have 2 in front of me. I have a UHF and I have a VHF version. You can just about make out the screens there. So the one that I'm waving here, this is the VHF radio. The one that I'm waving now is the UHF radio. So the differences are the VHF radio, if you look at the antenna, it's quite a long antenna. It's quite a thick antenna compared to the UHF. This is a long, thick antenna. The UHF is quite a short, kind of stubby antenna. You can get them where they're long, but then they're really, really thin. So that's the quickest way to tell the difference. Or alternatively, if I just pop the battery off the back, and I'll do that on this one because it's not my personal one, it clearly says there frequency, and it's got numbers in the 400s. If it's VHF, the numbers are in the 100s. If it's UHF, the numbers are in the 400s. So I'm just going to pop that back on. This one is one of our digital radios. It is password protected. So I'm just going to enter the ProMed generic password. Ours boot up with the ProMed logo on the screen. And yeah, so to turn the radio on, all I did was I just twiddled this little dial at the top here, which is the power on and volume control. So when I turn it all the way and I hear a click, it'll turn off. And when I turn it up, you will see on the screen on this one that it is adjusting the volume. So I'm just going to leave that down. We're not got a second radio to play with. The next thing is obviously the antenna. Now, whenever I get a radio, I always, sometimes I get radios and they look a little bit, I know it's not easy to see on this, but there's a small little gap above the antenna. If you're not looking carefully, you can't see it. So I always just give the antenna a firm clockwise kind of twist, just to make sure the antenna is in firmly. If it's not in firmly, what you'll find is your radio is not actually transmitting very well at all. The antenna is what allows the radio to transmit. So just a quick little twist on that at the beginning, just make sure it is in nice and firm. Next, we have the channel selector. So on these particular radios, it's the one on this side. On other radios, it might be the one on this side. Sometimes the antenna's to one side and the channel's in the middle. It varies from radio to radio, but what you'll see is if you look at the top, you will see that there are some numbers. Now, sometimes the numbers come on the dial, sometimes the numbers are around the dial, and the dial has a very clear line showing you where the channel selector is. So at the moment we're on channel 1, I can spin this dial all the way around up to channel 16. Some radios only have 4, some only have 8, but the general principle is you turn it to the number you want. Now on models such as this, you will see on the screen that we have a visual readout of what channel it is as well. We've got a push to talk. So on the side of any radio, what you'll find is there is a long button. Now, they don't always have a colored border. This particular model has an orange border. Some of the ones that I use also have a gray border, or some are just a long key with a rubber shroud. It doesn't necessarily have a color, but it is always the long one. That is always your push to talk. That's how you know it's your push to talk. It's long and it's on the side of the radio. Also on this model, it comes with some side buttons. So if you look above the push to talk and if you look below the push to talk, you'll see that we have some buttons. They are our side buttons. Now, depending on the radio, depending on who's programmed them, they can be used for many different things. Quite often they're left dead. And one of the things is if they're left dead, move it near my actual earpiece. As I'm pushing the button, I'm getting some audio out of that. So it's a useful indication for something. On an analog radio, so some of the older radios, one of those buttons will often be set to monitor. So that just means rather than the radio deciding what you need to be listening to, it will let you hear the white noise. And again, it's a really useful facility sometimes. On the top of my radio, you'll see there is an orange button just below my finger there. That orange button is frequently programmed as an emergency button. It doesn't have to be programmed as an emergency button, but I don't know anybody who's programmed that orange button to anything other than emergency. Just be aware, of course, that it doesn't necessarily need to be programmed. So on this one, if I just quickly press it, it doesn't do anything. You do have to hold it down for a few seconds there, and that will enter emergency mode. So on this particular one, it is identifying that we are sending an emergency message. This one uses channel 901. There is, talk group 901. There is a reason for that. And again, this has an audible emergency. And again, there is a reason why we've programmed ours like that. Some don't necessarily make a noise or beep when you put them into emergency mode. Some do it silently. So there's no indication at all that you've sent an emergency. Now, again, on this one, I have programmed them so that I can just press and hold this emergency button for around about 2 seconds. And it should then cancel itself down. It actually hasn't, which means this is not a management programmed radio. Let me just give that another go. Nope, that's not going to cancel. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn that off. The easiest way to cancel any emergency alarm on a radio that you're unfamiliar with is just to turn it off. So I just turned it off using the power on and volume key. So I'm just going to turn that back on. You can see that a light came on there. You can see the screens come on. So I'm just going to rekey our generic password in there. We've got ProMed coming up on my screen there. So that's now gone straight back in. I'm back on channel. I'm not in emergency mode. And that's the quickest way. If you've got a control facility or you've got sort of radios that are programmed as manager radios, you might find you've also got the ability to cancel emergencies remotely. So it's never a continuous transmit. There is always a break somewhere in that transmission, and that just allows messages or digital commands to be received the other way. So our manager radios are programmed that if we receive an emergency alert, we can acknowledge that. We can then also go into our menus, we can send a response back, and that would tell the radio to exit emergency mode, freeing up the channel. Have we got anything else on these? Yes, we've got function buttons. So on the front of the radio, you've got various buttons. So you've got a green one, you've got a red one, you've got a one with one line, you've got one with two lines, you've got an up key, you've got a down key. So again, these are variable. Quite often on radios with screens, one of the buttons under the screen will access a menu. Your up and down keys will navigate through that menu. The other option will be to exit the menu, and it'll be soft keys. So there'll be a label on the screen telling you what to do. Otherwise, they might be labeled P, P1, P2, P3, P4. You might get a P0. And they'll have specific functions. It might be you've only got a small screen, and you'll have to kind of know what the shorthand of that screen for that radio means. But you know, read the specific radio user manual if it's not obvious to you. On ours, if you press the green key, and I know the camera's not very good, but that puts us into our full contact list. If I press and hold the green key, then that gives you your common contacts, which is basically our control room contacts. So if you need to initiate a private call, then that is something that is very quick and easy to do. We've programmed our red key that it always goes straight back to the home screen, and we've programmed the up and down on these to alternate through the zone. So on ProMed there, that's got nothing on that channel. That's on cycling, go back to ProMed. So rather than just being limited to 16 channels, some of the newer radios with the screens have got capabilities to store many more channels. So we can just issue that radio knowing that the channel that they're going to need on that event is available. And then the other thing we've got is a keypad, a full sort of alphanumeric keypad there. So we've got, you know, the 1, 2, 3 all the way to *0# and it's got the ABC all the way to WXYZ available on the keys. So with it being a digital radio, we can transmit a digital text message. We can also direct dial another radio if we know the ID of it and initiate a private conversation. Some modern radios, if you use Tetra, for example, they're interconnected with the telephone system. And again, you can do that with UHF or VHF radios with a repeater. So I could actually place a telephone call via my radio if I ever needed to. Moving on to the mobile radio, and I've not got one of those to hand. Unfortunately, it's in the store. But the power on key, let me just bring up the annotation key there. So the power on key on this particular radio is where I've just circled. It's a small little button on the Motorola's. It's just next to the volume control. Quite often they are separate now. It used to be that you could push in the volume knob and that was your power on. So again, just be wary that specific models do these things differently. We've got, just let me move on. We've got the volume or the channel wheel, which is this on this radio. So on most of the modern radios now, rather than just having a dial that controls the volume, that dial can be changed very rapidly into something that will adjust the channel quickly for you, usually by pressing the dial Sometimes it could be by pressing another button, but that wheel can do more than one thing. So it's always worth looking at the screen and seeing what's happening when you turn that wheel, just in case it's doing what you don't want it to do. It's always easier to find that out quickly rather than a bit later. Now you've got your programmable buttons. So these are usually found below the screen. They are on pretty much every model labeled P1 to P4, and how they're programmed will vary on a per dealer or per owner basis. Quite often P1 and P2 will be to navigate channels up and down, but again, that does vary, so don't rely on that as a guide. Have a play with the radio before you go live, especially if you're in control room. Make sure you get to know your radio. If you're in a vehicle, figure out what you need to know, rather than if you get told to change channel somewhere in the event because you go into a different area. Just know how to do that beforehand. It really does make a difference. Another thing that you get is you get your function buttons. So exactly like the other radio, you've got your function buttons here. You've got a green, a red, you've got a 1 dash, a 2 dash, and up and a down. And again, they can be programmed differently depending on how your radio is being set up for what particular purpose. So yep, just check those. We also have our emergency button, and again, that's programmed in the same way as the Handportable radio. So sometimes it's silent, sometimes it's loud. If it's in a vehicle, it might be that there is an additional emergency button somewhere in the vehicle. We're building an adapter for our radios in the control rooms, and there's going to be a foot switch, and we can configure how that foot switch works. It can be set as a dead man's, i.e. you lift your foot off for a period of time and it will then automatically go into emergency mode, unless you've kind of used the key to override it. Or it can be where you stamp on the pedal for half a second and it'll activate the emergency. I know in some trust vehicles on their airwaves, they've got an emergency button just down to the right of the steering wheel. So with it being a mobile radio, you do have additional ways of sending that emergency signal as well. And then the last thing to note is, unlike a hand portable radio, you must also have this lovely fist mic. There's no microphone built into the radio itself, although there is a speaker. Your speaker is this grill here. So you'll be listening there. The fist mic generally doesn't have a speaker in on a mobile radio, sorry. The fist mic only contains the microphone, and the speaker is often embedded within the unit itself. And then, as per the Handportable radio, you'll have a long button on the side of the fist mic, and that is your push to talk button. Other things to note, mobile radios are typically seen to be more powerful than the Handportable radio. That's because a mobile radio must be running on an external power supply. So that external power supply could be a 12-volt vehicle battery. It could be a mains to 12-volt converter. It could be another particular 12-volt power source, whereas a Handportable radio is limited off the battery that fits on the back of it. So a mobile radio will typically output 25 watts. A Handportable radio will typically output 5 watts. So basically you've got 5 times the power output of that radio. That doesn't mean it's going to get 5 times as far. It very much depends on a lot of other conditions, where you are, how it's set up. The antenna is actually the main thing that makes a difference. So on a mobile radio, you will always have an external antenna. It's usually a BNC or an N-type connector on the back of that radio for your external antenna to connect. Whereas on a Handportable radio, it almost always screws on the top. You can get converters to allow you to use bigger antennas with a Handportable, but with a mobile, it has to be external. Now, it's the antenna that makes the big difference to the quality of the received signal, and it also dictates how far your sent signal is going to send. So if it's a vehicle one, you ideally want the one that's bolted to the vehicle rather than the mag mount. Either way, you want it as central to the roof as possible, because that roof is your ground plane. And if you've got a nice wide surface area on a metal ground plane, that is allowing the signal to really use the base of that to kind of send its message up and down. So rather than just a kind of little waggle, you've now got this absolutely massive kind of signal being sent. And likewise, the signal being received has got something to reflect on really kind of get that signal into the antenna. If you're using antenna that aren't on a ground plane, make sure you buy antenna that's, say, ground plane independent. They're ones that are designed to work without that metal base. They'll usually have a solid lump of a ferrous metal in their base, and then that is acting as the ground plane. So let's get those annotations cleared. It's just clear all drawings, turn that off. And let's now look at how we're going to test our radio. Just going to let Isabel in. So to test your radio, first thing is, as we did, we checked our radio makes a noise at power on. Not necessarily every radio will, but unless it's designed for a covert reason, most radios tend to make a little bit of a noise through their speaker at power on. That's telling you two things. Number one, it's telling you it's turned on. Number two, it's telling you that the speaker is working. If you've got an earpiece plugged in at that point, you'll probably hear that noise through the earpiece. So I tend not to. I tend to want to make sure the radio works first, and then I'll plug my earpiece in next. I'll also look and see if a light comes on at power on. So a lot of radios at the top of them have a little LED. That LED will usually come on for at least 1 second when you're powering on. It doesn't matter what color it is. It could be red, it could be green, it could be amber. Sometimes it cycles through the colors depending on your radio. But again, it's just that indication that A, you know the LED is working, B, you know the radio is definitely turning on. If you've got a screen, have a little look, see what is on the screen. As I say, mine tells me what channel I'm on, what zone I'm on. If I'm on a repeater, it tells me the signal strength of that repeater. It usually has an H on my screen to tell me it's in high power mode. This particular model that I'm holding is a GPS model. So it says on the side 785G. That G means GPS. So I often have a little satellite image in mind, which tells me that I am connected to the GPS system and receiving coordinates. I can also see it's got a battery indicator telling me I've got 3 bars of battery. Even on the old-fashioned LCD screens, battery was one of the more common ones that we saw because it was the most useful piece of information you had about your radio. So if there is a screen, check it. If there's another way of checking your battery, check it. Then you'll need to check and make sure that you're on the correct channel. So whatever event you're on, whatever film set you're on, whatever you're using your radio for, somebody will have told you you are on channel something. That might not be channel 1. Channel 1 is always the busiest channel because people seem to default to it. If I do the channel plan for an event or something similar, channel 1 is typically an unused channel because that just means people can't swing their channel, select that 1 and hope for the best. So make sure you're on the allocated channel for your particular purpose. And if you've got an earpiece, this is the time to plug it in. Sometimes when you plug an earpiece in, sometimes it will beep. This particular model doesn't. Motorola models, the digitals typically do. The analog radios typically don't. Test that it works. So again, just pressing a button lightly on these radios, if I've not programmed them, just makes a little bit of a noise. That allows me to check that my earpiece is definitely working. If I've got an analog radio, one of the older radios, one of the side buttons is usually what we call a monitor function, which I said is just kind of allowing that white noise. So if you've got a really poor signal that you're trying to get through, or if you think somebody else might be using the frequency but on different information, then you can just press and hold monitor and have a listen. I use that to test my earpieces because if I can hear something through my earpiece, that's proven that the speaker in my earpiece is working. And then the last thing to do is make a radio check call with control or another call sign. And that's serving 2 purposes. That's checking that A, I can transmit a signal and my microphone works. And B, it's checking that I can receive a signal and that my speaker is working. It's also testing the push to talk on my radio works. So especially if I've got a radio for the first time on an event, first time using the radio, I'll do a literal hand portable, nothing plugged in, radio check like this. I'll then plug my earpiece in and I'll then do another radio check using the buttons on the earpiece. Because what I don't want to do is unplug my earpiece later in the day and find out that actually my radio is not working. Or I don't want to use my radio and then get to a noisy environment, plug my earpiece in, find out my earpiece isn't working. Time to do these things is the beginning of the day before deployment. or when you first go into the position. Depends what you're doing. So quite often what I always say to people is test your radio, do a radio check when you get it, plug your earpiece in, do a radio check. Then when you get to position, go and do a radio check there, because actually you don't know what the signal strength is going to be in your position, and you need to have already eliminated the fact that it's not a problem with your radio. So if you know your radio works, but you're not getting anything where you stood, then you probably found yourself in the signal black spot that nobody detected in the planning phase, because you already know your radio is working. It may be that you need to bounce it off somebody who's halfway around the event site who can perhaps get that message to you. Of course, can't go through how to do a radio check without first of all going through a basic message. So a basic message is the fundamental protocol for using a radio. It's the fundamentals of how we transmit and receive information. So a message unit is a piece of information that you need to convey, and that needs to be acted upon or recorded somewhere. So first of all, you are the person out in the field, you are in your ambulance, you are the medic who is walking around the arena, you are the medic on the, whatever it is, you are the person out. So first thing we do is we say control from call sign over. And the reason we say it twice is because the first time you might not have held your PTT down for long enough. It might be that they're not paying full attention. Sometimes the radio just cuts off that first word. So we press the PTT, we think, control from call sign over. So the radios that we have are programmed in the same way as the Superior airwaves. So I'm just going to turn this all the way up. So what you heard there, I'm going to do it again, is you heard a little beep. That tells me the radio is ready to transmit. If I've got a repeater in use, the radio will confirm that the repeater is ready to receive its signal before that noise. So control from Papa Mike 01 over. So my call sign in this instance is Papa Mike 01. We don't have anybody on the other end, but we're just going to kind of go through the motions. And that's basically saying to control, I want to talk to you. So when you ring somebody on the phone, you never say, hi, it's John. Hi, it's John, Matt. You don't say that, do you? You tend to go, hi, Matt, it's John. And that's exactly the way we structure the radio message. So they will then confirm to you that they are listening. So they will say, call sign from control, go ahead, please, over. Now, there's no reason not to be polite on a radio. Manners cost nothing, and they take up half a second of airspace. I do not like people telling me that they don't have time to use please and thank you on the radio because they have to keep messages brief. A please and a thank you takes half a second. It's common decency, it's common courtesy. So let's get into good habits on the radio. So we will then go control, call sign, and then our message, and then we'll say over. So every time we transmit on the radio, we are confirming who we are talking to, we are confirming who we are, and you'll notice that all of those messages end with over. So over means I have finished transmitting at this moment, but I am expecting you to reply, please. So you've done that. Now, because radios are good, but not always 100%, and in line with the safety critical communications, which we're delivering a separate webinar on, we need to make sure that our message is being received. So what we are expecting from control is control are going to go call sign from control, summarize that message, over. And they need to know that what they've read back to you is actually the correct thing. So you will then go control call sign confirmed out. Because if they've got it right, you can then end that conversation. So the way we end the conversation with radios is by saying out. And out means I have finished with this transmission and I am not expecting you to reply. In a controlled environment where there is a control room operating, what we will have is control will then go control to standby. That means control is now ready for the next message. Sometimes there's a delay between a conversation ending and control going to standby, and that is because control might have to log that message, they might have to act on that message. Quite often, if you've asked for extra resources, not medical or not resources that are on your channel. So if you're a foot patrol and you've asked for an ambulance, the ambulances might be managed in a different channel. So control is now going on the other channel and requesting your ambulance. What control really doesn't then need is 3 other people shouting up, going, yeah, I've got a person with a cut finger. Can you create a job for me? No, because I'm trying to send the ambulance to the cardiac arrest. Give me 2 minutes. Wait for the control to say control to stand by. There is a reason why they've not said it. It's not because they've forgotten. It's not because they don't know the protocol. It's because they are acting on the previous message. Speaking as a controller, there is often nothing more frustrating than an exchange that quite clearly requires some action to be taken immediately, and somebody jumps in with some absolute triviality. And speaking as a controller, when that triviality is control, I've been out for 5 hours now. I'm getting thirsty. When's my break? Yeah, the answer is after everybody else has taken their break, if it's me, or the answer typically is me radioing the team leader for that sector, going, would you over? And that's literally all I'll say. And that team leader will then go and have a face-to-face conversation about why they're not getting their break for the foreseeable future. Because you've just interrupted control when they were trying to do something quite important to ask about trivialities. So another good point with radios is you're given an earpiece for a reason. It's not to look cool. It's not to show off. It's not to, oh, I've got an earpiece in. I'm important. I'm walking around. I'm important. I've got an earpiece. It's not for that. It's like you actually know what's going on. You're not just listening when messages are for you. You should always have an awareness of what's going on. If you're treating a patient, turn it down a bit, But if you're a team of 3, one of you is the radio operator. Your role is to watch what is going on with the patient treatment and maybe to do a little bit of clerking, but you are there to be your radio operator. You are there to send and receive messages and know what's going on, so that when your team is saying, yeah, this is quite urgent, we could do with getting them back to the first aid post, and what do you reckon is the best way? You can say, by the sound of it, there's not many ambulances, or I know all the buggies are in use. Why don't we see how far we can walk them, or it seems all right at the minute. I reckon we can get an ambulance up there. Let me speak to control. If you're aware of what's going on, if you've got that kind of mental model of resource commitment, of requests, of how busy things feel, then you can help your team make informed decisions. Also, you can be prepared. If you're hearing of things happening in a certain area of the arena and you're a foot patrol, then maybe, don't patrol in the opposite direction. If it's sounding busy, maybe patrol, towards the incident. Don't go to it unless you're instructed, but, don't move yourself deliberately further away if you know something's going on. Equally, if you've just heard that 3 teams have all been pulled out of an area, then maybe patrolling the area that's now devoid of cover in case something else comes in. Take the information, make some reasoned kind of decisions on the ground with it. But please do pay attention on your radio. So the example, let's do a radio check. So I've got my radio for the first time today. The way I'm going to deliver a radio check, so I'm going to play both roles. So I'll try and change my voice, make it a little bit more exciting for you. Control from Papa Mike 01 over. Papa Mike 01 from control. Go ahead, please. Over. Control Papa Mike 01. Please may I have a radio check? Over. Control. Call Papa Mike 01. Control. Radio check. I am receiving you Romeo 5. Over. Yeah, control Papa Mike 01. I am receiving you Romeo 5 also. Over. Control Papa Mike 01. That's confirmed. Out. There you go. And that's that radio check done. Both parties have received each other at strength 5, which is the best possible strength. We'll look at that in a little moment. But what if we've got a longer message? So what if we have a situation where we've got 3 casualties from one incident, we're the only resource on scene, and control's asking for a little bit of a better picture because They want to know what resources they want to be sending. They want to make a reasoned judgment before they start committing people. So first of all, we need to remember that messages need to be brief. 2 reasons. One, your radios get hot if you transmit for a long time. If you work in a control room and you're able to get your hands on the radio and you've got busy channels, what you'll find is you're even kind of having those little breaks, the back of the radio gets burning hot if you're on busy channels. And likewise, your Handportable gets really hot, and that kind of decreases the battery life. You can't transmit for as long. Your batteries get warm, they die after quite a much shorter lifespan than we'd expect them to have. So we don't transmit for more than 30 to 45 seconds. And the other reason is because there may be priority messages, people trying to get through. So we break those messages up. So the messages start as normal, but rather than that message being, you know, blah, 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 John Waffle, blah, blah, and they're just, you know, constantly talking, what we do is we'll break them up. So we will break it up into a part, and then we'll check that that part has been received. So, you know, control, pop mic 01. Patient 1 is a 34-year-old male complaining of chest pain. He appears to be quite clammy. Heart rate is this, BP is that. He's currently sat in the semi-recumbent position, and we gave him some aspirin. Copy so far, over. So that copy so far bit is meaning, have you received that part of the message? So control will probably then reply with pop mic 01 control, 34-year-old male, query cardiac, that's copied. Patient 2, please, over. Now we'll then continue with control, pop mic 01. Patient 2 is an 80-year-old female, non-asthmatic, who is having an acute severe asthma attack. She's on a salbutamol neb. Her rests are this, blah, blah, blah. Copy so far, over. And again, I'm expecting control to reply with a brief summary and get copied, continue, over. So we're just breaking it down, and we're just checking that those messages are being received. And then when we get to the end of our message, we will end as normal. The last message is typically end of message, over. And then we'll get a quick read back of, yeah, end of message, out. Just to, you know, there is still a bit of a message in that end. It's just more of a confirming the completeness of the message. The other type of message that we need to look at is our priority messages. So if you've got a digital radio, ask the person who's your controller, ask the person who set them up, do you have a priority interrupt button? Off the top of my head, because I've not delivered an event briefing in, probably 12 months now. The last time I delivered an event briefing was September 2019. So I would need to actually double check. One of the 2 side buttons on all of our radios is a priority interrupt. You press it once and it will send a text message digitally to the assigned control radio for that event. If you press and hold it, it keys priority interrupt mode, which means when you then transmit, it will override anybody not on priority mode. Not every radio has that enabled. It depends on who set it up. High-end ones generally don't, but we find they are in there. So we're talking about the text message there. So what the text message does is data and voice can typically use slightly different, what we call slots on the digital system. So basically, you're actually only transmitting for 50% of the time. So although you're continuously talking, that speech is getting encoded digitally, and it is being burst, whereas there's those gaps between the bursts, and that is used for digital signaling, so text messaging, GPS data, etc., etc. So by just quickly pressing that button, then the next opportunity for a data burst, and we're talking milliseconds here, not seconds, that next millisecond opportunity will come through, and it will flash up on the controller's screen, you know, priority call sign or radio ID. It tells you the radio ID. We program our contacts to link the radio ID to which call sign is allocated them, just to make it a bit easier for our controllers. And what we do with that is we as controllers in the control room have got various other options, which include shutting people up, It includes an all-call facility. So if I'm not using repeaters, I will do all-call, because if I just press all-call on my control radio, it kills any other conversation dead. You know, although this one's not a manager radio, I believe it's team leader radio. Yes, it is, because I've got all-call there. So when I select all-call and transmit, what you can see on the screen there is it's transmitting on all-call. And what all-call has done is it's basically stopped every other transmission dead. Even the person who was transmitting their radio knows to stop transmitting because it's gone through on the data burst. And everybody else's radio has stopped listening to them, and it is listening to the radio that is sending the all-call. Otherwise, if we're on a repeater system, we would use the priority transmit function, which is usually a menu key on our control radios, and that just allows us to very quickly get back to that priority caller. So if you've got an analog radio, if you don't have those features programmed on your digital radio, you just need to wait. You need to be listening for that over. If you've got the option to key your radio, if it only lets you transmit when the channel's clear, keep keying your radio. Don't do that if it doesn't, because you'll be talking over somebody. But if it does have that channel free lock to make sure it can only transmit when the channel's actually free, keep keying it until you get through. Otherwise, just wait until you hear over or out. Get your finger straight on that PTT and you say priority, 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 your call sign over. So in this case, priority, 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 Papa Mike 01 over. We don't say what the priority is. We don't say anything other than those words. That is the cue for every other person on that channel to shut up, take their hands away from their PTT and listen. Control will then acknowledge. They'll do two things, and they will usually say them very, very quickly because they know there's a message waiting. Certainly I say it very quickly. All call signs, please stand by. Priority caller, call sign, please go ahead over. And it is literally that quick with me. I'll say that a bit slower for you. So it's all call signs, please stand by. Priority caller, call sign, please go ahead over. And the reason we always confirm back the call sign is because there may have been two priorities come in at once. And we need to be absolutely clear who's talking, because otherwise we'll just get a garbled kind of mush come back at us. So in the example that we're using, all call signs, please stand by. Priority caller, Papa Mike 01, please go ahead over. Again, I'd usually be doing that a lot faster in a control room. So in reality, it's much more like all call signs, please stand by. Priority caller, Papa Mike 01, please go ahead over. But I will slow down for the call sign to make it explicit who needs to talk. And then you just follow the normal message protocol. Usually, every time control speaks, control will go priority Papa Mike 01, control go ahead, just reinforcing that this is a priority message and you should only interrupt if you have a more urgent priority. So it might be that the priority we've chosen to accept, we're now finding out is acute severe asthma attack. Actually, somebody else then jumps in and goes priority, priority, priority. And as a controller, you're going, what's worse? You will accept the second priority. You'll make a note you've still got the first priority and you need to get back to that. But that second priority could then be, I'm on scene cardiac arrest. So you would deal with that and you would just keep re-emphasizing all the time that you're dealing with priority by, priority Papa Mike 01, go ahead. Priority Papa Mike 02, priority Papa Mike 02, and so on until the priority is over. I generally, if I've then finished a message in a control room with just priority and that message has gone out, then I will go, all call signs, please stand by, priority situation is still active. If I've got a priority on hold, it is all call signs, please stand by, multiple priorities ongoing. Priority, waiting call sign, standby 1, still dealing. I still know you're there. I still know you're a priority, but I really need to act on this first. And then as soon as I've done that, I will be straight back to that priority again with a reminder, all call signs remain standby, multiple priorities. Even if I've dealt with all of the incoming, and I've actually got everything dispatched, I might well then say all call signs, please stand by, multiple priorities, because I would then go back to them all in order that they came in or that I accepted them, just for a quick sit rep. Is everything okay? Have you got the resources you wanted? Has the situation got better or worse? I will then probably still again say all call signs, please stand by, multiple priorities, because at that point I'll need to breathe, have a drink of water, recompose my mental model, because in that time what's happening is you're making a lot of dispatch decisions, you're making a lot of movements with people. You've probably got other people in the control room that you've been passing messages to, talking at, perhaps shouting at if it's CCTV, get me eyes on, whatever. And you just need that moment now to actually look at your screen and go, right, who have I actually got left? Let's rebalance the cover, just, you know, for the next call coming in, because at the moment I've got nobody in the campsite because they're all on jobs. So let's get some people on the perimeter of the arena so they can go either way. And I'll then start doing my little bit of balancing, and then I'll look at my situation and go, right, okay, control the standby. Sometimes that can take 2-3 minutes. Sometimes that can take 10 minutes because those priorities keep calling in with further changes. But it's worth, if you are a controller, it is worth making sure you've got your mental model sound before you go back to standby, because there's the worst thing you could actually do is start taking more messages without necessarily having a full understanding of what your situation on the ground is, because you're going to struggle to make appropriate dispatching decisions unless you've got that straight in your head. Last thing we're going to look at is the common shorthand and the TLAs, or 3-letter acronyms. So you heard me earlier use Romeo. So Romeo is the strength received. So it's usually done formally within a radio check, but if a signal were to suddenly degrade while I'm talking to somebody, I would typically go, apologies, Romeo 3 or Romeo 2, over, just to kind of make them aware that actually your radio strength has suddenly really dropped off. You know, especially if I'm asking someone to resend, am I asking them to resend because I wasn't listening, their message was a little bit garbly, I wasn't really clear on the meaning of what they were conveying, or am I asking them to resend because there was distortion from the radio end? Now, and those two things can make a difference, because if it's I wasn't listening properly, or it was a long message, or I'm not sure of your meaning, stand where you are and resend the message. If I then, you know, please resend was Romeo 2 over, that means you've gone down a hill, you've moved somewhere, you're in a metal building, and I can't really make out what you're saying because the radio is bad. There is no point in resending that message. Stood where you are. Move. Go to somewhere where there's better reception, where you can transmit clearer. Get height. Easiest way to get better radio is get height. People forget carrying a radio down here on your belt is not giving your radio much height, and it's also giving it a half-meter barrier in, you know, around about 90 degrees of its transmit arc. Hold the radio up here. You're still wearing your earpiece, or, you know, hold your fist mic down here, hold the radio above your head, and actually from where it was on your waist, you've massively increased it. You've got it about 75 centimeters further up in the air, and you've also gave it a full 360-degree arc to transmit around. And that can be the difference between strength 5 and strength 2 in some areas. So Romeo's a little key one there. Some people don't use the Romeo system for strengths. They'll use Lima Charlie, meaning loud and clear. It doesn't save any syllables. I don't know why people say Lima Charlie, but it does mean loud and clear in the majority of circumstances. There are some organizations that will use Lima Charlie to mean a lost child. Of course, there is no such thing as a lost child. You either have a missing child, i.e. where the child is missing, you know the child to be missing from your current situation, or you have a found child, where you have found an unaccompanied child, and you need to acquire the persons in charge of that child. It is the parents or the guardians who are missing in that circumstance. You know, be really, really clear when you're talking about this. It's just as bad if people tell me they are bringing the lost property to the information point. I always wonder at that one because I go, you can't be bringing it if it's lost. You must have found it. And they go, oh yeah, I'm taking the found property to the information point. Yes. Somebody will report that their property is missing, but you will find their property. It is exactly the same with children. A parent will report that their child is missing, but you will find a child. So absolutely get that one in your head, because quite often we will be asked to participate in a search, or we are the first person in high vis that a worried parent will come to. And it makes a difference in control as to the steps we then take, as to what we do on the gates, as to how we start looking. If we know that a 4-year-old child is missing, CCTV is probably limited use, and we need to flood the area with bodies, and they need to be looking at 4-year-old height. On the other hand, if we find a 4-year-old child, we will use CCTV and we will backtrace and try and find the parents, and we will go out to in looking for parents. Whereas if it is a missing child, we will go in to out doing a search. It is the small things that make a difference. Just make sure you're clear on your terminology. The fire service, quite often, depending on your service, it is often more hose, hose being the latter word. So more hose means I want the hose, you need to send me the hose. The hose needs to come into the building with me. Or they will say hose out, out being the last word, meaning take the hose away, pull back on the hose, I no longer need this. And they use the order of the words to differentiate their meaning. And again, your organization, your event might have a similar protocol for sort of phrases where the word is used in different contexts, and the order of the words is used unambiguously, so that if you only hear part of the message, if you only hear the last word of the message, you still know what that means. In ambulance world, ETA is our estimated time of arrival. That is quite often used if we're doing at-mist handovers, if we are bringing people back to first aid posts, or ambulances getting to scene, ambulances going to hospital. So estimated time of arrival, or ETA. Conversely, ETD is our estimated time of departure. So this could be, waiting for a vehicle to clear at a hospital. It could be we are stabilizing a patient at a scene. It could be we've got a patient in a medical center before they go to a hospital and the doctor or the nurse wants to do something. So ETD is estimated time of departure. Again, that information is really useful in the control room, because we can plan what gates need to open at what time, and we can just maybe get that sequencing right and maybe make a couple of adjustments to crowd flow or to traffic flow to facilitate that departure of an emergency vehicle. RTB is probably the other really common one. RTB means return to base. And that is basically, please go back to where you were deployed from, so that you can have your break, so you can stand down because your radio is dead, because you need more PCR forms, whatever it may be. RTB is return to base. So we said over, meaning I have finished my transmission, but please can you reply? Out means I have finished my transmission, I'm not expecting a reply, thank you very much. We also have a few other little bits of things. We never use Roger. Roger is, the bill. It's, police dramas. We don't say Roger. We don't say 10-4. We don't say 10-1. We're not America. We don't use 10 codes in the UK. We don't have code yellows, code blues, code browns, code reds. We speak in plain English. Because we should all be wearing earpieces, because our radios may contain sensitive information. We should never be transmitting patient identifying details by radio, but we may be talking about CPR in progress. We may be talking about a severe asthma attack. We may be talking about sensitive topics that we don't necessarily want people to hear, so we should always be wearing earpieces. So just keep that in mind. BBA is born before arrival, DOA is dead on arrival, DOD, dead on departure. We try not to use those as abbreviations because they can also mean other things. But we try and stray away from kind of abbreviating anything other than those ones there. And clear, plain English is absolutely the way to go when it comes to radio communications protocol. So just to recap tonight, and we were almost bang on the hour, which is unusual for me. So we've looked at the hand-portable radio, the different knobs and buttons that it has, how to use them, how to turn them on and off, how to change channel. We did the same with the mobile radios. We've looked at how to test our radio when we're first giving it, when we're putting our earpiece in, when we get to our site. We've looked at how a basic message is composed. We've looked at how to transmit a longer message. We've looked at how to send an interruption if we have a priority message. And then we've briefly looked at the common shorthand and three-letter acronyms that are often said on a radio. So I hope you've gained something from tonight. We are issuing CPD certificates. I am reliably informed by the admin team and our operations management team that our certificates have now all been sent out if you have requested one. So if you are still missing one, please email webinars@promed999.co.uk and we will sort that out for you. For tonight, it's again webinars@promed999.co.uk with your full name. We're going to verify that you're being in the session by using Zoom's register. So please make sure that you tell us the name you appeared on in Zoom. And if you've used a different email address for Zoom as you're going to email us from, please tell us what that email address is. We'll also verify that you've left us a review, and then we'll get those digital certificates emailed out to you within 3 business days. We actually have the spreadsheet set up to collate that data and issue the certificates in place already. So tonight's webinar has been provided completely free of charge because we do want to improve the standards across the industry. That is one of our wider aims, and we don't charge to do that. However, we would ask that you leave us at least 1 review in return. We're not even saying it has to be a 4 or a 5-star review. We ask for an honest review. If you don't give us 5 stars, we would ask that you provide us with some constructive criticism and feedback. We would like to get better. So if there is something that didn't quite meet your needs, if you think there is a way we can improve these webinars, please do, give us 3 or 4 stars instead, but just provide that constructive criticism, provide that feedback, and then we can make these webinars better next time around. Our review services are Trustpilot, Yelp, Google, and Facebook. If you have already reviewed us on one of those, then we would please ask you to send us a message on one of the other review sites before you request your certificate. We're just going to pop those links in the chat for you now. There you go. And I'm just going to give you the email address in the chat as well. There you go. So, does anybody have any questions? You can type them in the chat box, or you can use the raise your hand function. If you raise your hand, we'll have a 2-way dialogue. You can, we'll ask you to unmute yourself. We'll have a bit of a conversation about your question, make sure it's answered properly. Otherwise, type in the chat, whatever works best for you. I'm sure there are many questions. I know this was a very brief summary, so we've not necessarily covered everything. Nathan, I'm really pleased. Yes, we have contextualized those. If you do want to come and work for ProMed, at least you've got a little bit of a head start. I've just popped the YouTube link in the chat for you there as well. So if you have missed any part of the webinar, if you want to share it with your friends, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. We should have that uploaded in the next couple of days. Fergal, you're very welcome. D, very welcome as well. Just going to pop the link into the training courses if anybody wants to do our training. John, pleased to hear that you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for coming along. Prabin, also very welcome. ProMed social media links have just been posted in the chat there. So if you're not following us on Twitter or Instagram or LinkedIn, if you haven't liked us on Facebook, please do so. We are posting information about all of these webinars on here. Michael Clark, do I make use of the GPS facility to track staff at events to gain a better understanding of cover? So this is something I'm working on with our control software developers. First of all, I'm getting them to implement what 3 words when they have a moment. When they've done that, I want to be asking them to have a look at Hytera, XPS, and Hytera's little API widgets that you can get for your laptop. At the moment, I can bring up the GPS coordinates. I can find out the compass bearing and the direction of another radio. I can also obviously view them on my computer. At the moment, I haven't got an integrated map for them. I can, if I want to, spend a lot of money on the particular piece of software from Motorola or from Hytera or ICOM or one of the big manufacturers that will provide that. But with the software we use, it already has maps built into it, some of which are obviously very bespoke to the event. And that's why I'm working with a developer of that software at the moment, because I would really like to kind of have that integrated. I more often use it when I'm trying to find a particular member of staff, especially in the densely crowded area. I will send a GPS trigger to them. That will return on my radio, and it'll tell me distance and bearing. And as long as I know which way north is, I'm savvy enough to know that 360 degrees in a circle, 0 and 360 are north. So as I just, orient myself to north, spin myself around, count out roughly how far I'm walking, and then I should usually find that person in the crowd. I have had to do that for a job before as well. Andrew, you're very welcome. Denise, you're very welcome. Stuart, yep, priority protocols do vary from organisation to organisation, but the universally understood one is as soon as you get a gap, priority, door call sign over. How control rooms manage it varies from organisation to organisation, but what I've found is the one I use tends to be the most widely understood, that the situation is still ongoing, and it just reminds people to stay aware of that. Do we have any further questions from anybody? It would be really good if anybody does have any questions. Michael, pleased to hear that you've enjoyed tonight's webinar. Fergal, codes make things more difficult because what we have to remember in this industry is a lot of our staff are transient staff. So we don't necessarily have the same staff week in, week out, or day in, day out at an event. Our staff also migrate between companies. They migrate between different events, different venues. And therefore, the code words are very difficult to remember because with every organization using different ones, every venue using different ones, events want specific ones for them, not your company ones, it gets really confusing. And what you tend to find is staff don't remember what's for what event. So, for instance, I remember when I used to do festival stewarding, I did 2 consecutive weekends. Mr. Ash on the first event was any type of fire, including large fires. On the second event, Mr. Ash was only a small fire, and Mr. England meant a large fire. I then went back to a third event when a Mr. Ash was any kind of fire again, and it just kind of got confusing. And I did have a fire which I was going to regard as large because of the potential for it to become so. So I radioed through that I had a Mr. Ash, and fire trundled down. No blue lights, nothing, just trundled down. And I'm stood there having discharged a load of powder, a load of water onto some gas canisters, and I'm really hoping they're cooling down while I'm watching this little 4x4 fire trundle down without its blue lights on. Turns out I should have said it was a Mr. England. But I forgot because I'd had that many different code words for a fire. Certain security companies would call that a code red. And again, that didn't help. Some organizations use code blue for any medical. Some will say code blue is only a life-threatening medical. And people just get confused, and then control assumes everybody knows what's correct because control is sat there with the list plastered in front of them, so they can always get it right. they're assuming everybody on the ground's getting it right when actually they're not. So what we always tend to say is stick to plain English, because if you're not wearing an earpiece, then you're not listening to what's going on. And actually, the other issue is public don't panic. We looked at that right at the beginning when we were talking about the initial actions at major incidents, and this fallacy that members of the public panic when they know about situations, when actually members of the public tend to either want the help, or they kind of freeze and wait for instructions, or they start to give instructions. So actually, member of the public overhearing that somebody's having an asthma attack probably isn't going to cause a mass stampede. Likewise, member of the public hearing that there's a fire, they're probably just going to go, oh, I hope it doesn't ruin the band, I want to say. If you watch YouTube, there's some videos of Tomorrowland. There was a great big fire at the stage, and people are just stood there on their phones. Ooh, what's going on down there? They're not rushing, they're not panicking. So there is a massive fallacy about if the member of public overhears something, there's a problem. I also don't understand organisations that seem to have a major issue with giving the details of a missing child over the radio. The child is missing. What is a paedophile going to do? We know the child is missing. So if we see somebody walking out with a child matching that description, when we still believe that child to be missing, then we're going to be rather suspicious of that. So actually giving the details of a missing child over the radio doesn't increase the risk of anything going wrong. It actually makes it safer, because then it means we're stopping people matching the description of the missing child. Stuart, very welcome. Neil, very welcome as well. So if there are no more questions, just to tell you that next week we are going to be looking at the psychological impact of major incidents. So my weekend is going to be doing a little bit of research, digging into the journals, looking at TRIM, looking at members of the public, looking at staff, looking at victims, and looking at the inquiry process, looking at the criminal process, and really thinking about how all of that affects the different people involved at major incidents. So we're going to look at that in a bit of detail next Thursday. So I hope you all come back to that. Please do share the details of that webinar with your friends and colleagues. Last call for any questions. While you're thinking, I'm just going to pop the information about getting your CPD certificate back on screen. So please do email webinars@promed999.co.uk with your full name, so we can verify that you're in this session. So again, if you're emailing from a different email address to what Zoom uses, please tell us the one Zoom uses so we can confirm that. We're going to check that you've left us a review, and we'll get your certificate out to you within 3 business days. 3 business days, by the way, is the end of Tuesday. Provided these webinars free of charge, so please do leave us 1 review. Trustpilot, Yelp, Google, or Facebook. That's our preference order, by the way. If you have already left us a review on one of the platforms, please leave us a review on another one of those platforms. It will be very much appreciated. Just helps build our reputation, lets people find out about these webinars and our other services. We are ultimately a business at the end of the day, and therefore we do need to make some money. If we don't, then we won't be able to provide these webinars free of charge, basically. So thank you all very much for coming along tonight. I am going to leave the chat open for the next 5 minutes till 8:15 if you would like to grab any of the links. Other than that, thank you all and see you next week. Bye-bye.